Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. It is Thursday, and folks, happy Halloween. Happy Halloween to all who do and do not celebrate it. Hopefully, you're able to use it, if nothing else, as an excuse to have your favorite guilty pleasure candy today, whatever that is. Throw it in the comments, throw it in chat. I'd love to hear if you have your one candy that you reach in the bowl to get, which is it? We talked about this on Real Hawk Talk last night with Jeff and Evan, and Evan has his normal terrible takes on food, which I love him for, but I don't know. I honestly, like, Milky Way's been on my mind a little bit. Snickers are always good. You know, the little Snickers, for whatever reason, are not nearly as good as like the king size Snickers. It's something about them is much different. So I'm not big candy sized, like fun size, I think they're called, Snickers. Milky Way, though, I think holds up in regardless of the size. And, I can never resist a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. I mean, those are the GOAT as far as I'm concerned. So I see Cameron says that he ignores his lactose intolerance today. We don't talk about it. Love that from you. I will warn everybody, I have decided to allow Finn into the show today. Finn, come here. That might mean that you hear some barking at times if he decides to get excited about, someone crossing the street or outside. Oh, 100 grand I see from Kane. That is an excellent pull. 100 grand are super underrated. They're excellent. You get the crispy, like Rice Krispie kind of thing and the caramel. Yeah, Finn just got back from the groomers yesterday, so he's feeling very, very handsome. Whatchamacallit from Taste Buds, that's a good one as well. I think that's a good sour Skittles. Anything sour I'm pretty big on. I like sour, so that's good. I see a Baby Ruth, not bad. Some people really like Butterfinger. I love the taste. I don't love that it gets stuck in my teeth. So I'm not a big Butterfinger guy. As I love a Heath bar, which I've been told by my son makes me an old. Like, I think you have to be old to like Heath bar. Apparently, I think Heath bar is amazing. How could you not like chocolate covered toffee? I mean, it's so good. Someone asked if Finn is a doodle. Finn is an Escapoo. Yes, he is a American Eskimo poodle mix. So he is a troublemaker, but we love him. He's my hiking partner. So we are not doing as much hiking right now during the season, but we'll certainly get back to that during the off season. So a lot to cover, and I'm going to tell you all, I'm going to warn you all, like, one of the downsides of me doing an every single day show, 220 straight days in a row. Excuse me, this should be episode 221. It should be as incorrectly titled. This is 221. Let's give myself credit for every day I've been doing this. One of the downsides is that you're going to get to see my emotions up and down. And so I am if you've been listening the last few days, I'm kind of in a mood about this team. I just am. I'm in a mood about it. And I've been reading comments, obviously I pay attention to what folks are saying and where their minds are and what they're thinking about. And some of this may also be due to the fact I finished my second draft of my article on home field advantage and what's going on at Lumen Field. It's probably the longest, most researched article I've ever done. Hopefully people read it and like it. I feel like I learned a ton by doing it, and I'm really eager to get it out so everyone can read it and talk about it, and I'll talk about it as part of the show. I just shared it with Mike Sando and Dave Bowling to get their input, so maybe we'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow when they're on the show. But it was also depressing, to be honest. Like what I found, it wasn't specific. A lot of it wasn't specific to the Seahawks, so there's a little bit of a spoiler alert there. But attending home games is just not as fun as it used to be. It just isn't. And a lot of that's due to the team. A lot of it's due to some other things that I won't get into on this show, and I'll save that for the article. But um, I am really tired of going to a game, screaming my head off, and having it not matter, and having the defense just not be good. And I got an email from somebody, I think maybe this morning, saying, really love the show. Wish, I think you've been off in your expectations. This was going to always be like a 7-win team. And, let's give Mike McDonald some grace and some time. It's like a bunch of mixed things. I've seen other people say like expectations for Ryan Grubb. He's been a phone, he's an imposter. He's not a good offensive coordinator. I've seen people say like you were way too high on these players and these coaches during preseason. And it's hard to argue with that at this point. But as I kind of looked back and I was like, all right, so let me think about what were my takes in preseason? What was I most excited about? What was I talking about? The number one thing I talked about was Geno Smith is playing at a different level. DK Metcalf is playing at a different level. And Reek Woolen is playing at a different level. Those are my three biggest. The other one that I had a feeling about but was hard to really gauge was Kenneth Walker, because he looked like he was moving in a different way than he had. He looked stronger than he had been. But you just can't really judge the run game during the preseason. Oh, the other take I had was like Derek Hall is not going to be a bust. This guy's going to be something. And so I look at it and I'm like, well, Geno Smith is leading still, week 9 is still leading the NFL in passing yards. DK Metcalf is maybe not any longer on track for his biggest receiving yards after missing a week. We'll see, but he is having his best season. Derek Hall is not going to be a bust. He's going to be a good player. He is a good player. Reek Woolen is having an excellent season. Depending on which metrics you're looking at, there's a lot of places that have him as the number one cornerback in all of football right now. So what else? I mean, so like these were some of the takes that I had, and I'll be honest about the things that I was wrong about too. I'll talk about those. But like my strongest takes have generally been right. What I was cautious about and what I was not able to really assess, and you just can't in preseason training camp practices during preseason games, is run blocking and run defense. It's fake. There's no way you can really see it. Even when they're in pads, you cannot tell. The other thing that makes it really hard to judge offensive line and defensive line play in general is they're going against each other. Like everything other than the preseason games, I wasn't in Tennessee, so I didn't see the joint practice, but even the reports there were very positive. But offensive line, defensive line is only as good or as bad as who they're going against. So if you have, let's say, pass rushers are dominating, on one hand, you're like, oh, sweet, our pass rush is great. But I've learned over the years that can be a mirage, because it can be because your offensive line is terrible and your defensive line actually is not great at pass rushing when they face a good offensive line. Similarly, you can see your offensive line, okay, well, they're creating some holes in the run game. Maybe this is not as bad as you think, but they're only as good as the defense that they're going against. And so I think if we look at this season and are very honest about where things are, it is the run defense and the run offense that are the most off track, like the most awful of all this. And I don't think any of us, myself included, none of us were like, oh, this offensive line's going to be great. Like that was never the case. Um, so that's not a surprise. The run defense by far is the biggest surprise. In my worst nightmare, I did not expect Mike Macdonald to take this group, whatever group it was, and have it be the worst run defense in the NFL. That was not on my bingo card. I just did not, like, mea culpa. I did not think there was any chance that he, as a coach, with the talent that they have on that side of the field and things that were lacking, that they would be the worst run defense in the NFL. And one of the worst run defenses I have ever been forced to watch. So here's the thing. I mean, the title of this episode is Starless in Seattle. I'm going to talk about why that's the title of the episode. The piece that I will just say here to start, or to kind of make this point, is if you only changed one thing on this team, one thing, if they were able to defend the run, which for what it's worth is like, it's not the hardest thing to do. It really is about like gap integrity, preparation, identification. Like, it's not the hardest thing to do. But if they just did that, then I think so many things fall into place for this team. If they just stopped the run, then I believe that they would be able to leverage their, I think, plus coverage corners more than they are right now. I think that they would be able to leverage their plus pass rush group, which they do have. I think when you are able to leverage those two things, then you are able to get more turnovers, more takeaways, because you're able to pressure more. You're able to cover on tougher routes as opposed to easier, shorter routes. You're able to get off the field more. You've already been a pretty good third down defense despite all of this. And Mike Macdonald specializes in third down defense, and so far that has been one thing that's been true. And if you were a better third down defense and you got more turnovers, the offense would have an easier time, would have the ball more often. The defense would get more rest. Like, this is, in some ways, it feels like everything is wrong right now with the Seahawks. But when you kind of tease this thing apart, it is the friggin' run defense. It is the run defense. And I'm not looking forward to Sunday. I'm just not. I think the Rams are going to run all over them. I'm going to hear from Mike Macdonald and the players that it's just little things. It's just details. We just got to keep working on it. It's a puzzle and it'll fit together at some point. My patience is worn thin. So if I could choose one thing, it would be to just have a defense like that just isn't a pushover, that isn't just giving that much free yardage to opponents. It is so demoralizing. So that is my mood. You guys should know that. That's my mood. and it's also kind of my diagnosis. One of the things that makes me happy, and then I'm going to get into this Starless in Seattle topic. I promise. One of the things that makes me happy is, one, seeing all of you all. It's so great to see you every single day, every morning. And we do this together. We're in this together. We'll get through it together. But I also, last night, I got to have Pagliacci pizza, which was amazing and tasted so good. I got pepperoni with hot honey, and it was fantastic. And then this morning, I logged in to see, and we are, as a community, like, we're on track again to give away more boots to Wildland Firefighters Foundation. So excited. 2 more people made purchases in the last 24 hours using code HawkBlogger. So they got 10% off of their order. That also means that they're eligible to win the pair of Seahawks themed boots that are being built as we speak. They're being assembled as we speak. I've gotten little sneak peeks at them, but I want to see the finished product and I'll show them to y'all. So by purchasing, you get that. And we are like 8 boots away, 8 more purchases away from giving away a second pair of boots to a wildland firefighter who protects our forests, for hiking, for just the beauty of the Northwest, protects our homes, protects our people. So I'm a huge fan of this promotion. I as you can tell, I'm a big fan of it. I'm really excited. Spokane-based company. And so it made me happy. Made me happy that folks are participating and we're getting to get good things on your feet and get good things on firefighter feet. So that's just cool. Got a couple super chats here. Let's get to those. Jack Turner says, it feels like this team has been stagnant for years. It does, Jack. You are right. If we were to rebuild or reset, who would be your top guys you'd want to keep and build around? Very good question. We're going to talk about this as part of this episode. So if I don't answer your question fully, let me know as we get on, and I'll come back to it. Garth Knight with a super chat says, Jekyll and Hyde team are these Seahawks. I'm honestly patient about all this as I never expected much this season. Congrats on Pagliacci's, by the way. Oh, thank you. It was very tasty. If you haven't signed up at hello.pagliacci.com/hawk-blogger, you can get all the exclusive special deals as well. So absolutely support them. Another local company that I love. So title of this show is Starless in Seattle. Why is that the title of this show? Well, when I kind of sit back and look at the state of the Seahawks, the conversation coming into the year that Jeff and I had over and over and over again is, do they have blue chip players? Do they have just undeniable players that are factors each and every week? And I think that as things stand right now, the answer is no. Like, I don't think they have a single blue chip player on this team. Now, there's a lot of ways to kind of judge blue chipness, but let me give you an example of a player that I love. I think you all love, is an excellent, excellent player. And, you know, kind of fits the bill from a PFF grade perspective. He's been the #1 graded running back in the NFL most of the year. He is no longer, unfortunately. He dropped to 3rd behind Derrick Henry and Bijan Robinson. But still, Kenneth Walker is having a good year. He's having a great year by a lot of measures. Is Kenneth Walker, does he impact a game the way Adrian Peterson impacted a game? The way Barry Sanders impacted a game? The way Marshawn Lynch impacted a game? You might say Brian, that is ridiculous. Why are you comparing him to Hall of Fame level players? These are some of the greatest to ever walk on the field. Yeah. That's kind of the point. Like, you need players that are Hall of Fame level players if you're going to be a Super Bowl team. They don't need to be Hall of Fame level players when they start. Generally, by their second year, they should start showing you that that's who they're going to be. By their third year, you kind of should know. And I have all the same excuses that all of you do. Offensive line's terrible. There's no blocking in front of him. You know, the run scheme from Ryan Grubb isn't what I was hoping it would be. It's not as creative. All true. Like, not going to argue. Do you know some of the offensive lines that Barry Sanders ran behind? Do you know how many yards that Adrian Peterson created himself? There's just something like Marshawn Lynch. He ran behind some really bad lines, but he found ways to impact games almost every week. And so I pick on Kenneth Walker not because I don't think he's good. I even think he's very good. He might even be great. But as of right now, I cannot call Kenneth Walker a all-pro factor every single week type of player. And that's unfortunate. I go down the line and I look at, let's look at players from different draft classes. So Kenneth Walker is the number one running back in his draft class. He's outdoing James Cook. He's outdoing Brian Robinson, Jordan Mason, Kyron Williams, Breece Hall. So on one hand, you got the best running back of the class. That's cool. If I look at 2023, I add that class. Bijan Robinson's the only guy ahead of him. He's ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. He's ahead of Devon Achane. If I add 2024, he is still just behind Bijan Robinson. So I want to be really clear. I'm not saying Kenneth Walker is not a blue chip, will never be a blue chip player, or that we have the full story on him. What I am saying is 2.5 seasons into his career, he's not a player that is a factor in every single game he plays. I think that if you feel differently, help me see it with data. Because that's the bar. Geno Smith, who I love, he's having the best season of his career. He's leading the NFL in passing yards. He has shown his downsides. He has shown his lack of ability to take over games. And I think a lot of that has been, lack of command of the shorter passing game, the quicker passing game. Some of those things have not been excellent with Geno this year. And as much as I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in football, I don't think he's heading towards being an all-pro. Not at this point. I think a lot of that's due to the offensive line. Not going to disagree. And I know that there's people that are like, well, they have issues with Ryan Grubb. And I know a lot of people are upset with Ryan Grubb. I think Ryan Grubb has not been excellent. I also think that It's very hard for any offensive coordinator to thrive with the way this offensive line has been assembled. And the fact that they have the number one passing offense in the NFL despite this offensive line, I think is in large part because of Ryan Grubb and what he and Geno Smith have done together. The fact that DK Metcalf's having his best year is, I think, a large part because of Ryan Grubb and the way he's utilizing him. So people can hate Ryan Grubb. They can feel however they want about him. He's not the place where my mind goes initially. If anything, he's the guy that I'd like to see when they have just a acceptable middle of the road offensive line. And they just don't have that right now. But as I go through, I mean, I just talked about Geno, I talked about Kenneth Walker, and it's almost most important to be talking about these young players. What about on defense? So I go to the let's go through the 2022 draft class of all defenders, of all positions. The highest graded player for the Seahawks from 2022 is Riq Woolen. He is the 18th highest graded defender from that class. Right behind him at 21 is Boye Mafe. So you have the 18th and the 21st graded players from that class. Kobe Bryant, the Seahawks took in that draft as well, is 34th. None of those players have a grade over 80. And you might think, well, we're not just going to judge this by PFF. I'm just using that as a way to kind of ground us, and then we can have our own opinions from there. But like Aiden Hutchinson is the top graded player, 94.9 grade. Now, granted, he's injured now. Aiden Hutchinson looks like a dominant player. Would any of you disagree that Aiden Hutchinson is a guy that every single week is a major factor for the Lions when he's on the field? Like, he's undeniable. And you can say, well, that's not fair. He was like the number 2 overall pick. The Seahawks didn't have an opportunity to get a guy like that. I get it. But guess what? No one cares how you got the players. Richard Sherman wasn't the second overall pick. Cam Chancellor wasn't the second overall pick. Earl Thomas wasn't the second overall pick. Steve Hutchinson wasn't the second overall pick. Neither was Walter Jones. Like, he was a top 6. But in any event, actually, maybe he was, was he 3? I can't remember. But I think Springs was first and then Jones. I always forget those two. But no one cares at the end of the day what capital you had to use to acquire a Hall of Fame player or an all-pro blue chip player. It says you find them. And my point is, Seahawks, like, I think Riq Woolen is maybe the closest to being a blue chip defender. And I think if this run defense was better, I think we'd be having maybe a different conversation about Riq Woolen than we are right now. But let me give you another example. If you go to the 2023 draft, Brian Branch for the Lions. If you're not watching Brian Branch, if you haven't seen him enough, this guy is impacting the game every single week. He's doing it the way I think all of us expected a guy like Devin Witherspoon to. He is strong. He's a great run defender, physical. He takes the ball away. He's a good blitzer. He's great in coverage. He can play nickel. He can play safety. He is a 90.4 graded player on PFF. This is like, you're going to be crazed to hear this. If you look at the 2022 and 2023 draft classes combined, the Lions have 3 of the top 4 defenders in the entire two classes combined. Aiden Hutchinson's number 1. Brian Branch is number 2. Kirby Joseph, you might be surprised, is number 4. Their safety is number 4. He's got an 89.9 grade. He was drafted in the 3rd round that year of 2022, I should say. So, yes, the Lions have a lot of things going well for them. They've got a great offensive line that they assembled, but they have also, Brian Branch, he wasn't even taken in the 1st round. He was a 2nd round pick, 46th overall. You could have had him. You could have had him multiple times. Kirby Joseph, 3rd round pick. So my point is that they're hitting on, I don't think Kirby Joseph's truly a blue chip player. I haven't seen enough of him to say that. Brian Branch is. Aiden Hutchinson is. And if you have 2 blue chippers on one side of the ball, then you're talking about a team that's interesting. And the Lions certainly are interesting. And so for the Seahawks, I look down that list and I'm like, who are the guys that impact a game that opponents fear? I don't think there are any. I think Reek Woolen's a guy that they largely avoid, but did Josh Allen avoid him one pass after Reek Woolen broke up a ball in the end zone? That was not a good look for Reek against Keon Coleman. I think Boye Mafe and Derek Hall are very good ascending young players. We are not at the point where I think opponents are shaking in their boots when they have to go against those guys. And so this is where I kind of get to this point of, JSN is not looking like a blue chip player. I'm higher on JSN than most people, but I don't think he's a blue chip player. So far, he doesn't even look like a Julian Edelman level player where he's just open all the time and you can, nobody can cover him and you can just move the ball with him. Charles Cross started off the season looking like a blue chip left tackle. He has fallen off. He is like a good, probably Pro Bowl level, which is good. I mean, I'm not going to be sad about that, especially considering how he's played, but he has not been dominant. He's been good. And so what this all adds up to is, yes, Ryan Grubb, Mike McDonald, they got to do more with what they've got. This team is not a bottom third of the team, bottom third of the league roster. I don't see it that way. I don't think anyone sees it that way. Yes, there are young players that, are still developing, and generally veterans are a big part of how you become a contending team. Not a lot of teams, unlike the Seahawks, during the 2012, 2013, not a lot of super young teams end up on both sides of the ball end up being real contenders. You usually need some veteran presence. And even then, Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, Red Bryant, there was a lot of vets on those teams. But what I am saying is that there is a limit to what you can do with good, not great players. And the unfortunate reality for where the Seahawks are right now is nobody has stepped forward as a great player. Look at even Malik Neighbors is a perfect example of, he's already looking like a blue chip player. That's an awful Giants team, an awful quarterback, a pretty bad offensive line. But Malik Neighbors is almost impossible. He is a factor each and every week. And he's a handful for people. And he's just going to get better. The Seahawks just don't have that on either side of the ball. So that's pretty sobering. And I think that it doesn't mean that it can't happen. Maybe someone will start to build that resume over the last part of this season. But, Byron Murphy, who's a guy I'm super high on, he's shown some flashes. It's not uncommon I went through defensive tackles. First year defensive tackles very rarely are particularly impactful. I'm not out on him in any way, shape, or form. And I think that he will get stronger and better over the years. He's a diligent worker. All the things are pointed positively there. But I think the major point I wanted to make this morning was there is a real ceiling on what this team can be if they're not going to have guys that are irrepressible, if they're not going to have guys that are undeniable, that look like they are on Hall of Fame potential trajectory. And it is a super high bar, and it can feel super unfair, and maybe even like, why are you even talking about Hall of Fame? And it's because the only thing I care about is winning rings. Like, I'm not in it for the Mariners ownership approach of like, let's be competitive, but never do anything interesting. Like, I'll take 5 years of losing to get one ring. No question. I'd make that trade every time. And in order to get a ring, you just have to have that level of talent. Like, how many Super Bowl winning teams don't have at least a couple of Hall of Fame level players on them? I mean, it's not common. It's just not common. So that's kind of that's the challenge, I think we've got some Leroy Hills. We've got some Lofa Tutupus. We've got some, Patrick Kearney's. Like we've got some good players. I'm not sure we've got the horses we need to really get the next step. And then this gets back to the question Jack asked at the beginning, which is, if you do like either accept that and you want to figure out who the guys you want to keep and build around, that's the hard part. Is there's this thing called the innovator's dilemma in business and technology, where, without getting through the whole philosophy or the whole concept, it's basically that you have something that's good enough, that's going good enough, that you are really reluctant to cannibalize it by doing something else, And so what that does is it opens up the door for competitors to do the things you're not willing to do and challenge your business in a way that you're not willing to challenge it. Well, the Seahawks have players like Boye Mafe and Derek Hall that I think are very good. I don't think you jettison either one of those guys. Byron Murphy, I think, is going to be very good. You're not going to jettison Byron Murphy. You just signed Julian Love to an extension. Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, I don't think there's any reason for you to eject either of those players from your future plans. That's a lot of names already on your defense. So now, where's the space? Where's the opportunity to be adding blue chip Hall of Fame level guys? You're basically just counting on one of those players developing into that. And it's possible, but that's a challenging position. And so then you end up with potentially a bit of a ceiling on how good you can be. And by the way, those guys are going to come up, Reek Woolen, this is his third year. So next year will be his final year of his rookie deal. You're going to start having to make decisions about some of these guys, and you're going to have to start paying them. And if they're not blue chip players and you're paying them market money, it gets tough. So I think that it's not crazy to think to believe, like, we'll see what Uchenna Nwosu, if he comes back. I don't think he's a blue chip player, but I think he would help. Um, and then offensively, the popular thing will be to say, well, like, let Geno walk. Fine. Like, I'm not here today to fight about Geno Smith, but you really want to hand it over to Sam Howell? Like, I don't know that Sam's on track to being the difference making quarterback. That's the path of least resistance. They can draft some guys, but there's not a lot of great quarterbacks coming out. DK is another question. DK is probably the closest thing you've got to a blue chip player on this team. He is a factor each and every week. Teams do have to handle him. Are you going to get better by letting your one close to blue chip guy go, even though he's probably never going to be like a truly dominant guy each and every week, or at least doesn't seem to be? Offensive line's your place where you can hopefully, like, man, if you could have drafted Dominic Pooney instead of drafting Christian Haynes and had him at right guard right now, we're probably having a very different conversation. So I'm not afraid to say, like, I'll walk from Christian Haynes. He's a 3rd-round pick. If he's not the guy, fine. I definitely will walk from Anthony Bradford. I will walk from Laken Tomlinson. So there's opportunity on the offensive line to bring in fresh talent over time. But overall, it's a little bit hard. Like, you're almost are forced to say, okay, we got to really start rolling the dice with quarterback, because you got to find something. But the hard math there is finding a rookie quarterback or young quarterback that even has the potential to become what Geno Smith is now is not likely. Like, a fractional percent of rookie quarterbacks ever develop into a player as good as Geno Smith is right now. And you're saying you want to get someone who's better, who can actually do more than what he can do. Now you're talking about fractions of probability. So that's where this is tough. And everyone's like, John Schneider's the problem. Fine. Like, I mean, you can get rid of John Schneider. Look around the NFL. Look around the NFL at other people making decisions on who they draft. A lot of them, the vast majority of them, are bad. And you could say, well, look at Detroit, or look at the 49ers, or look at, fine. You can look at all those places. They're not the GMs that are going to be walking in your door. So John Schneider, for my money, is still one of the better talent evaluators. He's got some clear blind spots, but he has drafted pretty well the last few years. So I think what nobody wants to hear is, it's like you're at the craps table and you roll the die, and it's just, it just doesn't turn, it doesn't give you the numbers you're looking for. And so you just got to keep rolling, and you got to keep rolling. If you really pushed me for it right now, I'd just say the Seahawks are stuck. They are stuck in the messy middle, the mediocre middle. And I think it's going to take a player or multiple players changing the trajectory of this team. You hope that a coach combinatorially with a player becomes something really special. The way that, to some extent, Geno's his best he's been with Grubb. DK Metcalf's the best he's been with Grubb. There's some signs that there's some synergy there. I think Kenneth Walker looks like the best he's been with Grubb. So there's some reason why. That's part of why I'm like, I don't know why everyone's so down on Grubb, but the offense, it's kind of like, to me, to some extent, the way I felt like everybody in the Russ versus the Let Russ Cook era was so focused on Pete and the run game and early down passing and how Pete was hampering the offense. And I'm like, the offense is like top 10, top 12, whatever it was, is the defense that's not good. And everybody was so focused on that. When people talk to me about Ryan Grubb right now, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this offense is good enough to be easily be 6-2 right now with the same schedule. It's the defense. It is the run defense. Like, it is 100% the defense. And so before last week, the Seahawks had scored 23 or more points in almost every game. Anyway, I have things I don't like about what Ryan Grubb has done this year. I don't think he is beyond criticism, but I think people that are focusing there are picking an odd place to focus. All right, we got super chat here from Garth. Says, Brian, I must say, doesn't every fan base consider their offensive line the worst in the league? Isn't Steve Hutchinson a Hawk scout? I don't think every team thinks their offensive line is the worst in the league. I do think that I wrote about it. Offensive line is down across the league. So to that extent, yeah, it's hard to do. But the 49ers offensive line improved this season, despite not spending a top pick on it. The Rams offensive line that's coming in this week is better than the Seahawks offensive line. Their left tackle was not a top 10 pick. Their guards are not, top picks. One of them was, I think, an undrafted player. Their center was not a top drafted pick. So, yeah, you can have a decent offensive line. Seahawks have not been able to do it yet. I had hoped Scott Huff would just come here and snap his fingers and get way more out of these players than what has happened. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's the players. Don't know. I just know that it's not good enough. Steve Hutchinson is a Hawk scout. I don't know why that matters. Garth again says, look at Russ with George Pickens. Reminds me of the Russ days with DK and Sidney Rice. Yeah, it was great to see. It was fun to see Russ, looking like his old self. Like, I'm happy for him. It's not fun watching a player just embarrass themselves and decay. And it was looking that way for Russ for a while. So it was nice to see him get out there and hopefully play well. There are going to be people that are like, oh, he's better than Geno. I don't think that. I mean, he does some things better than Geno, but yeah, I'm not a believer in that. But happy for him nonetheless. Henry Diesel says, we talk about O-line issues every, I think, probably season for the last decade. We need to call out the elephant in the room. If Wilson and Pete were replaced, why not John Schneider? Yeah, offensive line has been a blind spot for him, specifically interior offensive line. And so I just don't know that the grass is going to be greener. And if I had to bet, I would tell you that John Schneider has seen that quote thrown in his face a million times about interior linemen are overdrafted and overpaid, and would say it differently now. And I would also bet that Ryan Grubb and Mike McDonald and Scott Huff, who are just here the first year with him and didn't have the leverage to say, no, we need more than what we have here, that things will be different next offseason and that guard will be a priority next offseason. I've said that for years, and if he keeps doing it, then yes, you're right. You probably have to replace John Schneider. If he cannot prioritize the interior offensive line and get you good players, then you're really limited, and I think you'd have to look in another direction. So I think in that case, it's valid, but everything I've learned is that your offensive line coach, your offensive coordinator, your head coach do have a lot of sway over how you approach the offensive line. And this is their first year, and really this will be their first full off season where they've had a chance to get their hands on these players and see who can do what. That I think has an opportunity to maybe shift things this offseason. Now, This has been a very negative show, negative Nelly show. We're in a negative spot. I still believe against reality that this team's so much better than they have put on the field in some of these games, especially on defense. And I do believe that you don't need to be talented to be a better run defense. So if the Seahawks can make just that change, we have the bye week coming up as well. It'll give the coaches a chance to really self-scout, really make some decisions, change some things. I still think this season can be a positive one. Right now, it's looking bleak, but we could be. I feel like we're one game away from really finding something that could be sustainable and productive. So I'm not looking forward to the game this weekend. I guess, I mean, I am. I'm always looking forward to, like, it's like if I wasn't looking forward to it, I just wouldn't go. But I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go pregame. I'm gonna do my whole thing and see my friend. I'm like there's corgi races at halftime. Like, it's all good. But it's a little bit of like, watching through my fingers at this point. And I miss the days where you could just scream your head off at Lumen Field or the Kingdom or wherever I've been and feel like the defense was going to feed off of that and we're going to just dismantle the opponents, even if it was just the pass rushers getting off a little bit faster and hitting the quarterback more often. I want that again, because right now it feels like wasted effort. So with that, I am going to wrap for the day. If you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, I'd ask you to please do that. I'd appreciate it. Tomorrow, I'm looking forward to being on with Dave Bowling and Mike Sando. It's going to be great to be with them. We have got Gino press conference today, as well as Ryan Grubb and Adam Dirty. And then, as I said before, head on over to jkboots.com, use code HawkBlogger, get yourself 10% off your whole order, not just the boots, even if you get the belts, whatever. They got all sorts of great stuff there. They got amazing boots that'll last you a lifetime. Spokane family owned. So, Northwest shop. And if you buy a pair of boots, you get a chance to win a pair of Seahawks themed boots. And when we sell another 8 boots, we are going to give away another pair to Wildland Firefighters Foundation. So a firefighter will have the footwear he or she needs to keep our forests safe and our house safe and the Northwest beautiful. So head on over to jkboots.com, use code HawkBlogger, and click on the Pagliacci link in the description of the video. Get access to all the best deals on Pagliacci pizza and more. I would appreciate that as well. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This has been episode 221 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I appreciate you all. Take care.